What is up, NBA fans? My name is Alex Burns, and if you're anything like me, you're probably looking back at the 2009 NBA season wondering, how in the world did Dwayne Wade not win MVP? Just kidding. I mean, the Miami Heat's record was kind of average. They weren't contenders or anything, but nonetheless, Dwayne Wade had one of the most impressive individual seasons that I have ever seen. I vividly remember being a 7th grade student just in awe of what I was watching. I mean, there was game winners, there was buzzer beaters, there was drama that ended up with Dwayne Wade standing on top of the scorer's table, claiming that it was his house. I mean, honestly, there wasn't anything else you needed. That was my TV, that was my entertainment when I was growing up. And to be honest with you, I feel like this season is kind of forgotten. I feel like people don't really talk about Dwayne Wade's 2009 NBA season. Dwayne Wade has obviously went on to have one of the most illustrious careers in NBA history. He's got many championship rings, many All-Star appearances, and many All-NBA teams, but there's one thing that he didn't get, and that was an NBA MVP award. And I think you could say if there was any season he could have gotten one, it was 2009.
He was looking for contact from Jermaine O'Neal, got a piece of it. Wade, a facial! Yes, and the foul! Dwayne Wade going right.
As good as the dunk on Anderson Varejao was, in all honesty, there were other plays during Dwayne Wade's 2009 season that were just as good. I mean, let's be honest, it is pretty hard to reciprocate dunking on somebody so bad that his legs fold over his forehead as you step over him. That's pretty hard to top. But there were other plays, there were other dunks, there were other game winners that helped Dwayne Wade really put his mark on the NBA and catapult him into the upper echelon of NBA stars. The first thing I want to point out is the career high numbers that Dwayne Wade had in the 2009 season. It really was a career year for Dwayne Wade as he put up 30.2 points per game, which was a career high. It actually led the league. 5 rebounds per game, a career high 7.5 assists per game. And on the defensive end, he really came through. He had 2.2 steals per game behind Chris Paul, also a career high, and then 1.3 blocks per game, which was a career high. I know that Dwayne Wade is highly regarded as one of the best shot blocking guards in NBA history, but 1.3 blocks per game for a player that's 6'4", it's pretty impressive. So obviously Dwayne Wade put up a lot of career high numbers that year, and something that stuck out to me actually was he finished behind Kobe Bryant and LeBron James in the MVP voting. However, he had more points, steals, blocks, and assist totals than both of those guys, and that just kind of goes to show what kind of season Dwayne Wade had. Obviously, he wasn't on a contending team. The Heat had an average record. They were number 5 in the East, so he wasn't going to win the MVP. But to put up those kind of numbers, actually higher than two guys of that level, it really speaks to the kind of season that Dwayne Wade had, a career-high season that Dwayne Wade had in 2009. Another thing that I want to point out is the Miami Heat's roster in the 2009 season. The previous season, we have to remember that the Miami Heat had a league worst record of 15-67. It was just an abysmal year. I mean, there were injuries, there were trades. Pat Riley ended up trading Shaquille O'Neal at the trade deadline for Shawn Marion and Marcus Banks. But now that I look back on that, by the way, that is one of the biggest power moves in NBA history. There was a report that Pat Riley got into it with Shaquille O'Neal at practice over some small issue or something, and the next thing you know, Shaquille O'Neal is banished to Phoenix. And looking back, that is hilarious. I mean, that's a power move if I've ever seen one. But it was just an abysmal year for the Heat. I mean, Shawn Marion came in and was supposed to be the 1B to Dwayne Wade's 1A, a role that Shaq played, during their championship run. But let's be honest, Shawn Marion's a great player. He had a great career, a great run in Phoenix with Steve Nash and Amari Stoudemire, but when he came to the Miami Heat, he just wasn't that same player. He put up 12 points a game, and it just wasn't the kind of player that Dwayne Wade needed to really compete with the newly acquired Big Three that Boston just put out. So Shawn Marion's good. I mean, there's a reason why he was in the NBA for as long as he was. He was actually a part of that Dallas Mavericks team that actually upset the Miami Heat's Big Three in the 2011 finals. But there was a reason for all that. He was a great player. He played great defense, but he wasn't really that piece that the Heat were looking for to really make a deep playoff run. So coming into the season, I don't really think the Miami Heat expected to go far. Coming off of a 15-67 record, I don't even know, based on looking at this roster, if the Miami Heat really expected to make the playoffs or if they were just going to rebuild. I mean, let's look at some of these names. We have Joel Anthony. He ended up having a nice tenure with the Heat during the Big 3 days, but was still a young player in his second season. We have Marcus Banks. We have a young Michael Beasley. Mario Chalmers as a rookie. And then we go to Daquan Cook, Yakuba Diawara. Oh, come on, man. Got Yakuba Diawara coming off the bench for the Heat. Luther Head, James Jones, Sean Livingston. Sean Livingston coming off of that gruesome knee injury. We signed him from the Clippers in free agency. And then Jamal McGlure, Sean Marion, Jamario Moon, and then Jermaine O'Neal, you see. We actually didn't have Sean Marion and Jermaine O'Neal on the same team at the same time, as Sean Marion was actually traded at the trade deadline or mid-season around that time for Jermaine O'Neal and Jamario Moon. And, I could say the same thing about Jermaine O'Neal that you did about Sean Marion. He was brought in. He really wasn't the same player that he was earlier in his career. He had a great career in the late 90s and the early 2000s with the Indiana Pacers. He was a dominant force down low, and he had a great mid-range jump shot. He just wasn't the same player in 2008 that the Heat really needed. And it really showed, as the Heat kind of were led by Dwayne Wade, and Jermaine O'Neal only put up about 13 points a game, nothing to write home about. And at this point, I think he was probably more well known for his role during the Malice at the Palace that happened in 2004 than his play on the court. But nevertheless, this was the Miami Heat's roster, and it makes it all that much more impressive that Dwayne Wade was able to not only lead them to the playoffs this year, but to take the Atlanta Hawks to 7 games. And before you scoff at me, before you make fun of me for talking about the Atlanta Hawks as if they're an elite team or they were good, let me just remind you, this is the Atlanta Hawks team that had ISO Joe Johnson getting buckets. They had a prime Josh Smith, who in his day, he was one of the more athletic, just crazy high flyers that we saw in the NBA. He won a bunch of dunk contests. And then they had a young Al Horford, who was, an up-and-coming big player. He was pretty good. He was really solid defensively earlier on in his career, and he still is. And we also saw Mike Bibby on the Atlanta Hawks. And this was, before Mike Bibby really started to show his age. He was a pretty good point guard. He really got the team involved. He was a good playmaker. So don't slouch at me for talking about the Atlanta Hawks as if they are elite. They were a really good team. They were a tough out. And Dwayne Wade and the Miami Heat took them to 7 games. It was kind of a weird series with every team that won a game in the series. They actually won by double digits. So it wasn't like some close, every game was close, down to the wire game. But Dwayne Wade made it a series. He put up 29 points a game, which was pretty impressive, and did all that he could to really help the Miami Heat upset the Hawks, but in the end fell short. But I don't blame him after looking at this roster, and to me, it just makes Dwayne Wade's 2009 campaign all that more special. The last thing I want to point out about Dwayne Wade's amazing 2009 season is just how clutch he was. I don't know if you remember watching any games that year or if any stick out to you, but it seemed like every single time the Miami Heat were down in the fourth quarter, you didn't even panic because you knew that Dwayne Wade was going to do something special. You knew he was going to make some great play or hit some last-second shot that was going to lift the Miami Heat to a win. It didn't even matter if he shot bad the entire game. It just seemed that when the game was on the line, Dwayne Wade really elevated his game. There is one play in particular that really comes to mind, and it's in March versus the Chicago Bulls, as it was a great game. They ended up going into double overtime, and I'll never forget, I was watching the game, and I had a big test the next morning. I think I was in like 6th or 7th grade. I had a big test the next morning, and so my mom came to me and said, Alex, it's really late, you gotta go to bed. You got a big test you got to be ready for. And I freaked out. I was like, there's no way I'm going to bed, because I knew that if I turned the game off or if I, didn't watch the rest of it, I was going to be missing something special. Now that's just how you felt watching Dwayne Wade this season. You just felt like every single game, if you didn't watch, you were going to miss something great. And so after debating for a little bit, she finally agreed to let me watch the rest of the game. I think she actually watched it with me. So we both sat down on the couch and we finished the rest of the game. And sure enough, double overtime. Clock is winding down. John Salmons of the Bulls is dribbling the ball, looking to get a last-second shot, when out of nowhere, Dwayne Wade comes, he picks his pocket, and hits a running three as the buzzer goes off to give the Miami Heat the win. And in my opinion, that play just completely sums up the 2009 season for not only Dwayne Wade, but the Miami Heat. Just Miami Heat were always down, but because of Dwayne Wade's greatness that year, he always found a way to win the game for him. And man, instead of me just talking, let me just show you some of them.
Looking for Rose, Wade denies it. Into Salmons with 10, with 8, with 6.
Not a good matchup right here for the Heat.
Salmons,
There's
Wade with a steal, with 2. Wade puts it up for the win.
Yeah, baby!
He did it! He did it! Dwayne Wade with the steal and the game winner. They're going to stay with Wade and double team when they can be passing. We're still not certain who got that tip here on the Heat looking for the win. Wade.
Unbelievable. That is the only word that comes to mind when I think back about Dwayne Wade's amazing 2009 NBA season. Obviously, he didn't win the MVP award, but he sure played like one, and he really did leave his stamp on the NBA forever. Whether it was highlight plays, or poster dunks, or game winners, whatever it is, you name it, I'm pretty sure Dwayne Wade did it in the 2009 season, and the reason for this video is so none of us will forget just what we witnessed down in South Beach in 2009. So that's it for the video, and this is my first video, and I'm really looking forward to putting out more NBA content on this channel. So if there is a particular video that you would like me to make, if there is a story, or maybe there's another player that you feel like had an MVP caliber season but it's really gone unnoticed, just put it in the comments. Be sure to hit that subscribe button, and if you agree with me and you don't want anybody to forget about Dwayne Wade's historic career year in 2009, share this video out on your social media. My name is Alex Burns. Until next time, NBA fans.